Cameron from Commander Resources. Before we get started, what's your symbol? What exchange are you on?
We're on the Venture Exchange, Toronto Stock Exchange, and our symbol is CMD.
CMD.
Yeah.
Commander Resources, you've been around for quite a little while now, huh? Going back to the late 80s?
Yeah, the company's 30 years old this year. So
wow.
it started
Congratulations.
Started off called Major General Resources. Over time we rebranded and changed our name to Commander, but it's the same entity from back in those days.
And you stayed true to what your purpose is being a prospect generator.
Well, I mean, the command over the 30 years, there's been different iterations of it, but basically it's been a prospecting-focused company. And now we're a little more rigid with our prospect generator model, which looks to joint venture our projects and really expose shareholders to multiple projects being funded by other people's money, essentially.
So why'd you move in that direction? Like, what is it about this model that you say, this is wise for us, but it's also wise for those who invest the money with us?
Well, it's a conservative approach to address the sort of high risk-reward ratio that exploration has. The odds of discovery are very low, so instead of focusing all our efforts on one shot with all the money that needs to be raised to advance the project, we take it to the drill stage and then find partners, and then the partners take on that heavy lifting of the drilling, the definition work, the feasibility work, and we can start moving on to the next project. So ultimately we could have multiple projects being funded by our partners. And that also generates income. We get option payments, share payments, and we'll keep a little royalty. So it's very sustainable, and it protects our shareholders to a certain extent from excessive dilution. So it's a more sustainable model. But it's one of the few business models that really addresses that sort of high risk nature of exploration.
Well, you just said something that because we've had this conversation before, and I didn't realize that you really only take it up to the drill stage. I thought that you went a couple steps further along.
It's very tempting to keep going because you really love your projects and you believe in them, but I mean that's the enthusiasm you use to bring in a partner, but you really do want to drill it yourself. But that's stepping into the area where you can spend a lot of your treasury focusing on one or two, because that's the expensive part of exploration, a drill program, especially some of the more remote ones. So I'd rather spend that money building out the portfolio and finding new opportunities. And if we could have our shareholders exposed to 6 or 7 joint ventures and opportunities concurrently, that's much better ratio. We take a smaller piece of the action, but we're exposed through our royalties and through our share positions in some of our partners. So.
But it takes a certain amount of self-discipline to stay in that space.
Oh, very much so. We're all geologists. We all want to make that discovery ourselves, and you can do it different ways, but it's a temptation. But then all prospect generators are also faced with that decision where it's too good to give up, And if you look in the past with the prospect generators, Virginia's a good example. They were a prospect generator, but when they came across Eleanor, they knew they had something significant, so they drilled that one themselves successfully and sold it off to Goldcorp for incredible return. So every prospect generator eventually is faced with that tough decision.
You touched on the fact that we're all geologists.
Yeah.
Tell us about your team, because I think that this is fundamental, especially when you're at this point. You have to be able to take a look at a potential opportunity and from experience and knowledge know that there's something here worth moving to the next stage.
Well, prospect generation is a geology labor-intensive effort, because you're always looking for new projects. You're always upgrading your existing projects, and you're also marketing to the larger audience. So you got to be able to address what these other companies need. So it's geology intensive. So I'm a geologist. I've been a geologist since graduation, so 35 plus years in the business. Worked with majors and juniors as a consultant. Even dabbled briefly as a mining analyst. So know the banking side a little bit as well, which helps a lot. So strong geology background there. Worked for a major for about 18 years with Phelps Dodge, Freeport-McMoran. So that gives me a lot of background and international exposure as well. And then my VPX, Steve Weatherup, he's a seasoned geologist. I first hired him out of school back in the day when I was with Phelps Dodge running that.
Wow.
So he's got a lot of experience. So I managed to grab him back in. So he does my VPX work. Vice President of Exploration, and then Bernie Calhert, who's been with the company since day one. He's a senior geologist. He's worked for majors and multitude of other companies through his career. Well-known senior fellow in the community, so he's well established right across Canada. Everyone knows Bernie, so that's the core of our team. And then we rely a lot on experts and consultants, and that sort of keeps our committed overhead low and manageable, so we can expand when needed to do extra work or shrink back down and when we want to conserve capital.
Well, you talk about one of the benefits of investing in a project generator is that you're helping to de-risk, but that ability to offer that lower risk, it really is contingent upon the expertise of the team to be able to analyze whether or not there's something of value here.
Well, ultimately our projects have to be marketable. So we have to have something that's solid. We can't just sort of market a real estate play, so to speak. We have to have legitimate targets, and we have to address a marketplace that expands from new listed companies looking for listing properties to majors looking for that top tier potential target as well. So we got to know our audience as well.
Well, the audience is watching this right now and saying, okay, enough of that. What are you working on at the moment that would be of interest to me? How many different projects do you have in play? And then let's talk about your top 3.
Okay, well, we got, I'd say we have 10 projects that we're looking for partners on right now. We have one joint venture that's active, and that's with a company called Fjordland and their partner HPX, which is Robert Friedland's private vehicle. And they're exploring our South Voisey's Bay nickel cobalt property in Labrador. So that one's out the door, and that's being handled very effectively by those partners. So we got 3 others that are ready to go out the door of our 10. And the others we're slowly bringing up to marketability. But the 3 top ones are... We've done a lot of work in the last 4 or 5 months, and we're just starting to put that news out. We announced our results from our exploration program on what is probably our top project right now, called Savin.
Yes.
And that's a massive sulphide project in Ontario. We just completed a VTEM survey, which is an airborne electromagnetic geophysical survey. So we did that in the fall. We just got the results in January, and we just press released that last week.
And what'd you say in your release? For I know anybody can go take a look at it, but what are the highlights there?
Well, this is an interesting project. It's one the company's owned for 30 years. It's basically been sequestered in the vault, so to speak, which is a banker boxes with paper data and paper maps. So over the last couple of years, we've been digitizing and modernizing the database, and we recognize the opportunity. A lot of historical drilling, a lot of opportunity on the property, but it had never seen any modern exploration or modern airborne deep penetrating geophysics. So that's what we added to the existing data, and we're quite excited by the amount of conductors that was highlighted by this survey.
There's a resource there.
I don't know, I wouldn't go to say a resource, but there's a lot of exploration opportunities, particularly in areas that hadn't been seen before. So it opened up the ballpark, and it also expanded and enhanced what we already knew as well. So that's very exciting, and I think on the backs of that data, we should be able to attract a partner to take that one up to the next stage. So we're quite excited by Savin. That was exceeded expectations at the geophysical survey.
Then you have another one, a name that I can't quite pronounce because I'm not...
Nipisquit? Or no, we got so many. Well, the Flume, we have the Flume project in the Yukon is probably our second tier project.
Right.
And that's a gold project in the white gold district. We're all familiar with the white gold district because it's been so newsworthy over the last 10 years.
Yes.
With the coffee project being sold to Gold Corp and the original Golden Saddle project being sold to Kinross, now owned by White Gold. And then White Gold's got their new discovery at Vertigo. So an exciting brand new gold belt in Canada. It's only 10 years old. I mean, people forget that all that discovery work is only 10 years old. And we got a large land position there, which we call our Flume project. We got a 10-kilometer gold arsenic soil anomaly, which is how all these sort of white gold gold deposits seem to exhibit early stages. It's all about the soil sampling. There's hardly any outcrop. It's just unique in the Yukon. So it's a lot of mystery there. So, and
of course, the Yukon is such a great mining jurisdiction.
Oh, it's an excellent place to work. And even though it's the Yukon, it's actually, the accessibility is not as extreme as one would think. We're very close to Dawson. We can't drive there, but there are roads on the property because there's active placer mines. So if you could barge your equipment in, you've got road access. So it actually makes exploration quite feasible there. But our land position, White Gold over the last year or so has probably dominant land position. They're probably maybe 70% of the entire White Gold district. There's not a lot of free land available with serious targets on it. So I think we'll be able to attract a partner there. And the majors are looking at gold projects in there. So it's got all the hallmarks of a really
especially with the price
project.
of gold looking like it's firming up here a bit. And, getting into that attractive range.
Yeah. So that's probably our second tier one.
And number 3?
Number 3 is It's all subjective, of course, but I like our new Henry Lee copper project. It's something we just released some results here over the weekend, and it's a porphyry copper gold moly target in central British Columbia. So last summer we started, I wanted to increase our copper exposure in our portfolio, so we did some regional work in central BC. We staked this property just on spec, just based on off the internet databases that the government provides, which is probably first in the world in terms of quality.
Yeah.
And through our expertise in understanding porphyries, we selected a couple of areas. And this one, we went out there, did some soil sampling, highlighted a nice copper moly soil anomaly, and then we just picked up some land to the south of us, which the prospector held that further expanded the footprint. So we now got a 4-kilometer long copper soil anomaly underlain by some altered intrusive rocks that have all the looks of a porphyry. So that's from internet compilation, staking, and soil sampling to acquisition and a big target in a period of 4 months. So that's how rapidly you could develop new targets too. So we're hoping to bring in a partner, but if not, we're going to take that to the next level and do some geophysics and just firm up the quality of that target.
You said you wanted to bring some copper into the portfolio. Why? What is it about copper at the moment that because you're not the only person who's saying there's a future here in copper?
Well, we're quite diversified. We did have some copper assets, but I felt we could use more. I spent 18 years with Phelps Dodge, Freeport McMoran, so I'm a copper bull. I understand the copper markets very well, and I see an extreme shortage coming up. Maybe not this year, but in the next few years, especially with the electrification of the world. That's everyone talks about energy metals. That's copper primarily. All the other ones are secondary
because they don't have the same ability to transmit energy that copper does. Only gold is better, I think.
Copper is essential, and it's a well understood market. We know the sources of copper, we know the end users of copper, so we could do our market studies and know when it's in balance and predict when it's going to be shortfalls. And there's a lot of predictions that the shortfall is going to show up sooner rather than later, and it could get very extreme shortcomings in the market.
Well, there's a couple of things I think that are in play. There's the electric vehicle development, which is really only at its very, very early stages. And so if it takes off, the demand for copper there is going to be extraordinary. And then, of course, there's the continuing growth of power generation and delivery of power in Southeast Asia.
Exactly. I mean, you could study the copper requirements of developed nations, and they plateau out. I can't remember the number, but it's a certain amount of pounds per capita consumption of copper. And these developing nations like China and India in particular, they're still on the curve. When they get full modernization and the copper formula there suggests we need a lot more copper for them to achieve their goal of full industrialization.
So it's looking good. You're happy with the portfolio that you have in play right at the moment, and of course it's constantly changing as you bring each of these projects to,
we never
that
stop.
next stage.
We're always looking to get projects out the door. I mentioned my top 3. We're focusing on those, but we have the other ones too that are of interest to parties. But also, you always have to replenish the coverage. So we're always looking for new opportunities and new ideas.
You primarily are staying in Canada, though, from most of the projects that
we do
I
have one in
understand.
Mexico, but our main effort is Canada.
How come? Why?
It's a great jurisdiction. It's quite a diverse geology. We have the old Archean Shield in central Canada. We have the Appalachian belts and in eastern Canada, and we got the Cordillera in western Canada. So we got all the different deposit types of gold and or copper that we require in Canada.
Right.
Jurisdiction-wise, the public domain databases are second to none globally. So you could do a lot of your work from desktop studies from a first pass.
Right.
And then our tenure system is probably the number one reason why I like Canada. It's easy to acquire land here. In many jurisdictions now, you could just go on the internet with your Visa card and state the claims you need. So that's you can get your land position fairly cheap and easily. And then tenure doesn't require payments to the government. It's kind of in kind. You do your work, and there's a work requirement annually, but you can bank it for 4 or 5 years. So if you have a big year, you could put the land aside and not have any financial commitments.
Right.
A lot of other jurisdictions, there's annual taxes and annual work requirements that requires constant expenditures. So you got time to let your property season in Canada.
And this is a market that you know and understand because you've been here for a long time.
Yes. And so do a lot of our target companies. Canada's well endowed with a lot of juniors that explore Canada. So that audience understands Canadian assets better than most in many ways. So it's an easier for us to market our projects to our family of Canadian companies.
I'm guessing you've got good, long-standing relationships with an awful lot of those companies that are saying, okay, what are you working on now? And that you start those discussions fairly early.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our networks, and us senior guys have larger networks because we've been around longer, and it's a small community. Over time you get to know a lot of the people in the business, so it's very collaborative in many ways, working in this business in Canada.
Well, it's an interesting position to be in. So what's your top pitch to somebody when they go, okay, it all sounds pretty good, still, why should I put my money into a prospect generator?
I would put your money into a prospect generator because we manage our treasuries effectively, so we're not taking the shareholder money and excessively spending it on projects that probably would have a low probability of return,
right?
Which is pretty well every project. So it's an efficient way to go. It exposes the shareholder to multiple opportunities.
Yep.
So you don't have to pick the one project yourself that the company is exploring. You got an opportunity to let the management pick a basket for you.
Yeah.
And I would probably recommend that an investor in prospect generators invest in multiple prospect generators. Almost create your own portfolio of 4 or 5 prospect generators, and then you have that extra leverage with more and more opportunities from all their partnerships as well. It's a good approach.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing this, bringing us up to date on your top 3 and some of your other projects. And I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope that we continue to have these kinds of conversations in the future, because with it constantly changing, you're going to have new news all the time.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.